Smash Mouth Sports, we are live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all the major platforms. Maybe with Allison Kohler coming on, she's going to give us the millions of views we've been looking for. So she works for the Steelers Wire as well as the Game Day NFL. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Well, we're excited to have you on, talking Steelers football, talking the exciting offseason overall. The first question I got to get to is Big Ben's health. That seems to be the story that everybody is he going to make it another year? Because he started off like gangbusters with 11-0, and then down the season, his body just took a beating.
Yeah. I mean, I think I want to say it was in the Dallas game that he ended up getting injured, and he came out, he went to the locker room before halftime. And Mason Rudolph came in and threw a couple passes, and then he ended up coming back in, and it was like, wow, but Ben is very resilient. He's had a ton of injuries over his career, and he fights through it. So I know that he had a couple knee issues pretty much he was dealing with for most of the season. I found it kind of interesting that he was often, the camera would show him, kind of holding his elbow when he would go over to the sidelines. And I don't know if he was like massaging it or what he was doing, but I kind of found that interesting that none of the Steelers beat writers had even mentioned that or said, hey, what's going on there? Or, things along those lines. But I do think he's gonna make it. It's like I said, he's a tough guy, especially if the offensive line, especially if they're able to address some issues that they have along the offensive line. I think that'll help him out a lot.
Are you concerned about the offensive line? Because that was one of the strengths a couple years ago with this team when Big was throwing for 5,000 yards, and back when they had JuJu was going great and Antonio Brown and all that, and then that situation went a little buck wild there. But they've definitely had some injuries. Is it offensive line or running back? First pick. You guys are 24th overall. What would be your ideal pick?
My ideal pick would be a running back, but I sort of feel like they're going to go offensive line, Marquise Pouncey ended up retiring, so they need a center. They have a couple guys, but you know what I'm saying, not really starter worthy players. So I would go with running back. I think they're gonna go offensive line, but I guess you never know. They could surprise us. And back.
Yeah, you can never have enough offensive linemen. And I love Najee Harris. I love Travis Etienne. Those are great backs. Either one of those guys. Najee Harris, to me, screams of a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's big, he's strong, he's physical. And as you obviously know, the Steelers were the worst team in the league last year in rushing. They had the least amount of rushing yards of any team. They just had a lot of problems at the running the ball. What's going on with the running back situation currently if they don't draft one in the first round? What happened?
Geez, so they have a ton on the roster, but none of them stand out as being able to carry the load, or even if they go with running back by committee, there's nobody there that you look at their name and it's like, oh wow, he's going to be good. You just don't. But again, they do have a new offensive coordinator, and Matt Canada, and he's kind of known for his. I mean, he's never been an OC in the NFL. It's all college. So, and obviously college is it's a different game, different kind of speed, different kind of game plans, things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see, how Matt Canada affects the offense. Obviously you can't, in what could be Ben's final season, you can't throw him new stuff. You can't expect him to do things that he hasn't done in 17 years, but, it's certainly going to be interesting to see, how that run game, they need a good running back to take some of the pressure off of Ben. That would really, really be helpful. So yeah, Harris is awesome. And I do think that he's got Steelers written all over him. So it's going to be interesting to see if he falls to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because, again, the Steelers at the beginning of the season, I think part of the reason what made them so great, their defense, of course, but they were throwing the ball so much early in the season. A lot of these older quarterbacks can still be great, Tom Brady, Breeze, Big Ben, et cetera, but you gotta run the ball, you got to protect them. Cam, let's get you in here. What kind of questions you have? What's your first question out of the gate? And don't get too crazy there. Don't be triggered. He's got a Patriots hat on. So
well, I know. I saw that right away. I was like, uh-oh.
She's got her composure, Cam. But I tell you what, she will break those Dukes out any second there if you get out of line. So let's come off with some haymakers here.
Long history between these two teams. I want to ask about JuJu, and the way he was acting towards the end of last year, dancing on the midfield logos, stuff like that, do you at all fear that he's becoming another Antonio Brown with his antics?
I think to compare him to, and a lot of people have, but to compare him to somebody like AB just seems like, whoa, because they're sort of on different levels. I mean, I guess when you look back at how AB's kind of insanity started, there are sort of, signs that, JuJu could end up being like him in the next year or two. But at the same time, he's so young, and like people his age, that's what they play video games. They wear pajamas all the time. And, that's what they do. They go live on TikTok and all this different stuff. So it's just a different kind of league than it used to be, 10 years ago with social media and everything. So
correct.
I think he's going to end up being that bad, but I guess, you never know.
What surprised me the most about JuJu was, to go back to Antonio Brown, obviously he was a great number 2, and everybody's like, this guy's going to be the next thing. He's going to be just as good as AB or close to it. And then AB leaves. And not only does the antics get more explosive, the production goes down. It was like such a very interesting thing. But what surprised me the most, though, was that he's told everybody he was gone. I'm gone. Cleans out his locker and everything. And he's on Instagram. Thank you to Pittsburgh, and he comes back. So do you have a reason or a theory behind that, or do you have some inside knowledge on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have no inside knowledge. But I don't. But I think everybody was really surprised that he ended up coming back and signing. But I think that the league is doing a lot of one-year contracts this year because of the revenue, and because there's just not as much capital in the NFL right now. So I sort of feel like maybe Pittsburgh said to him, "Hey, we'll sign you on this 1 year, $8 million contract, but next year." Because they're going to be flush with money. The Steelers are going to be flush with money next season. But they do also not have a lot of players signed. So that's going to be interesting. But anyway, going back to JuJu, maybe they did say, hey, next year we'll take care of you. We'll give you a long-term contract with all kinds of, digits in it. And maybe that's why he ended up, because, he did get other offers from other teams, and he just decided not to go. So it's going back to what you're saying about Antonio Brown. I still feel like JuJu is not meant to be a number 1 guy.
Yeah.
And I feel like there were a lot of receivers with Claypool and James Washington, and just all the wide receivers. Ben spread it out a lot last year, and I think that kind of affected JuJu's numbers. But I just don't feel like he's going to be a true number 1 ever.
I've got the craziest theory ever. And I got to ask you, you ready? Are you sitting down here? All right. Antonio Brown has not been re-signed yet. And he keeps telling the Bucks, I need you to re-sign me. I've got a theory. My guys in Tampa are like, let's re-sign him. And my theory is for Tampa, no, because we needed him last year for a good number 3, because our top 2 guys were banged up, and Howard and all the guys. They're healthy. They're coming back. We got some young guys coming up the pike, Scotty Miller-Johnson, etc. Is it crazy to think in this alternate universe that for one more season, Antonio Brown comes back?
It is crazy to think, yes. Yeah.
There's no chance. No chance.
I think there's a better opportunity for Le'Veon Bell to come back than Antonio Brown. That's just my take, but
there's probably a better.
I don't know. I just don't see him coming back.
Would he be welcome? Would the community welcome him back? Because I almost feel like it was divorce. They each slashed each other's tires. They ripped their clothes, burned down their houses. But then they look around and like, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was a couple years for both parties. Because both parties have not thrived as well as when they were together. It's almost like this chaos with Big Ben. Just he makes it all kind of work.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they say Antonio Brown is like one of the hardest workers in the entire NFL. So, I think it's sort of split down the middle in terms of whether fan base would welcome him with open arms, or, what they would do. But because I think that they've seen, okay, life without Antonio Brown in terms of production on, with the receivers is not as awesome as it was. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of people, especially old school, dudes and ladies in their like 60s and 70s and 80s who are like, screw Antonio Brown. Like, we don't need to die, you know? So they just don't want to see any of those antics. And I think they're already sort of kind of getting sick of JuJu in terms of all the videos and everything that he was doing too last offseason. So I just don't, it would be nice if he came back, but I don't think that that'll happen.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it right now, the stats. A lot of people may not realize this, but Deontay Johnson had the most receiving yards for Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. So everybody talks about JuJu, and everybody talks about Chase Claypool with his size and his speed and his athleticism and all the boxes, comparing him to Calvin Johnson, at least size and speed and similar attributes. But Johnson is kind of the unsung hero there. Is that what are your thoughts about that?
He had a large, rather scary case of the dropsies last season, and I think at one point he had like the most in the entire league, and I think I want to say that's how it ended too, that the season ended with him still having the most amount of drops. But once he gets focused, I think that he's, you know, a force to be reckoned with. I sort of feel like he's going to have a decent career, you know, in Pittsburgh. I think he's only going to keep getting better, which is great for the Steelers.
Cam, I see you chomping at the bit here. Let's hear it.
Well, I want to ask you, the two hallmarks of the Steelers to me are that you churn out wide receivers better than anybody, and your head coaching stability. The Jets are about to be on their third head coach in 4 years. You've had 3 head coaches in 60. Yeah. So,
go ahead.
Can you just speak to those two things? I mean, Hines Ward, JuJu, now Claypool looks like he's the next guy. What is their secret at receiver? Because I'm sitting here with my team. We can't draft receivers worth of crap.
I've noticed that.
So, what is the secret the Steelers have with the receivers and the coaching?
Right. I wonder if, in terms of the receivers, I wonder if their scouting team is just awesome. Like, maybe their scouts are awesome. That's the only thing that I can think of. And obviously, a lot of people say Kevin Colbert is a genius in terms of, you know, diamonds in the rough, you know. They have had great success with the wide receivers. And I'd be surprised if they don't draft another one this year. I don't think it's going to be early because it's not a big need. But in terms of the coaches, it's just that all goes back to the Rooneys. You know, there's only been one owner, you know, since 1933. And they're all about tradition. And you hear a lot of players who leave Pittsburgh and they're like, ooh, you know, it's not as good out here as it was in Pittsburgh, you know, and some of them end up coming back. So I think that it says a lot, you know, in terms of sort of the family, the tradition, you know, winning obviously is big, and they've just gotten really lucky with head coaches, I think.
You know what I think it is? You touched on it, but you're right. It all starts with the owner, with the Rooney family, and then the coaches, because the fact that they don't panic, I think also helps them out. They don't give up on a guy. They stay the course with coaches, you know, 3 head coaches.
Because everyone was ready to fire Mike Tomlin a couple of years ago.
And they listen to their scouts. Unlike some of these other guys like Bill Belichick, who say, hey, guys, this is the chart. This is what we have here. Okay, great. Now go throw it away. And he does whatever he wants to do. So I think listening to your scouts is the key because they see these guys are at these pro days, is at these workouts. Overall, Allison, what would you say? How would you grade this offseason so far with the Steelers? Just overall.
It's been typical. I don't think that, you know, because they're usually not very active in free agency, that they've always believed in building their team through the draft. So all these players that they've signed so far off the street, you know, some of them haven't even played in the NFL. Matthew Sexton and some linebacker guy that they just signed. So, I mean, I guess a B-ish, maybe a C. I really don't know because it's so typical. You know, it's just been a typical Steelers offseason where they don't really make a lot of noise.
Yeah, I mean, other than re-signing JuJu, which was really like $8 million, which is pretty much a bargain for a receiver of his caliber, I didn't hear there wasn't a lot of splash plays. Like New England went to the hills, $200 million. You know, they swung for the fences. So, you know, and then Tampa Bay re-signed 100% of their starters, which is unheard of. So there was a few teams that made a lot of moves, and the Steelers just kind of played steady. What would you prefer as a fan? Would you rather them kind of go all in like the Patriots, you know, spend $200 million, swing for the fences, have a strong season, and then maybe 3, 4, 5 years, if a guy gets older, they have one bad season? Would you have a preference one way or the other? If you have to swing for the fence or always being level?
I think always being level because obviously this year they didn't have the cap space. They just didn't have any money. So they had to do a lot of restructuring. You know, they had to get super creative. They had to kick the can down the road a little bit with some players. So they just didn't have the money to do that. And if you think about it, good teams don't really have a lot of cap space because they have good players and they pay them. So they're not going to have any money. You know, if you look at the Cleveland Browns, for instance, right? They've been flush with cash for like ever because they don't have any, or they didn't anyway. It seems like they're turning a corner now, but yeah, but I digress. It's just, I like the level kind of Steelers way. You know, they don't really ever, like you said, they don't make any splash plays, you know, in free agency. So, you know, I think that bodes well, you know, for the Steelers. It's working.
Absolutely. You brought up the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask, what happened in that playoff game? Because we heard, you know, the Browns don't have their coach and this and this and the other and all that. Mm-hmm. And everybody thought the Steelers were going to smack the Browns, and the Steelers just did not look dialed in on that game. The game was 28-0 before, you know, anything got going.
Right. I almost wonder, it almost makes you wonder if everything just went to their head, you know, like they were just, you know, constantly, because, you know, everybody was saying that, you know, this is Ben owns the Browns, you know, that he's never lost to the Browns and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, I just wonder if all that kind of hype maybe got to their heads. And of course, JuJu saying Browns is Browns and, you know, all that jazz. So I have no idea you just can't, it was just baffling. There was not one thing that there was a myriad of things that just went wrong, you know, from the snap over Ben's head and James Conner looking at the ball, like as it's laying there, they're like, what do we do? You know what I mean? Yeah. And then some Browns guy, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, like I can't tell you how many times I wanted to turn the game off, to be honest with you. And I'm sure a lot of Steelers fans probably did, but I kept going and you know, it was crazy.
They made it a game.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They did. Yeah. Toward the end.
At the end. Yeah. I mean, if your goal is to win second place in the two-person race, I mean, I guess that's if you want to be optimistic. But what's funny, you talked about the TikTok videos and everything. I saw so many videos. This one guy like smashed his $2,000 TV with his jersey. I'm like, people were going buck wild in that game because I think you hit the nail on the head. Like nobody in Pittsburgh thought that there was a 1% chance of losing that game. I don't think anybody outside of Cleveland thought they could win the game. In fact, I really don't even think Cleveland really thought it. But I think it was a combination of so much hate in the media. I think Steelers just came out in that game and they were ready to make it a dogfight. They were ready to fight. Mm-hmm. And the Steelers just did not match that intensity. Do you put any juice or any blame on Tomlin for not having his team prepared at all, or is it?
Yeah. I mean, I want to say. Was it one of the players ended up coming out? I can't remember who it was. And he said that they weren't like, the question was probably like, why did you lose to the Browns? And the player said, we weren't prepared. And it's like, how are you not prepared to play this game that has so much importance to it? And especially being in division against the Browns, it's just, yeah. So I do put a bit of the blame on Tomlin because, you know, again, just how can you know, he's been around the league for a long time, especially, you know, he's coached the Steelers for a long time. And it just makes you wonder, like, you know, maybe they thought it was going to be a cakewalk. You know, maybe they thought they could just go in there and do their thing and not have to worry about anything. But they obviously, you know, that was not how it went.
You know, the ancient philosopher Michael Tyson used to say, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So when you go into a boxing match, a UFC match, even if you're ranked number 1 and he's ranked 20th, he still's got fists and he can knock you out. You got to be prepared. All right, let's get Cam. Last question. So
it feels like there's a consensus that this will be Ben's last year, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's John Clayton from wherever he is, ESPN. I'm not really sure, but he ended up saying that he thinks Ben's going to play for a couple more seasons, which I guess he could, but I don't see it happening, to be honest.
He's going to eat a lot of avocados and a lot of TB12 to last 3 or 4 more seasons. He's going to have to do a whole ancient philosophy, avocado wine and toast, and just swimming in avocados to make it 4 or 5 more years. But yeah.
What I want to ask is, obviously the top 5 quarterbacks will be long gone before you guys pick at this rate. Would you be at all okay with a second-round pick on a Kyle Trask or a Kellen Mond or one of those second-tier quarterbacks?
No.
No?
No. Because I just sort of feel like they aren't – the Steelers have taken second round, third round, fourth round quarterback. They just don't have any luck with quarterbacks outside of the first round. So I sort of feel like that would be a wasted pick, being that they have so many other things to address. But I say that, and I've been a proponent of the Steelers should have drafted his heir apparent like 3 years ago. And of course, Rudolph, I don't know if they ever thought that Rudolph was going to be the starter after Ben retired, but I just feel like in Green Bay, where they had Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, I mean, obviously it's not going to happen like that all the time, but you would think that the Steelers would want to be more prepared for life after Ben Roethlisberger.
Don't be the Patriots.
Right. Yeah. I think the answer is Dwayne Haskins. Okay.
Yes.
You never know. It could happen.
Right.
That's not a look. The guy was a first-round pick, 15th overall. I know a lot of people hate him. I know people are going crazy, ready to just go buck wild. But at the end of the day, he had a terrible season last year. But you sign a guy for a league minimum with that potential. He redshirts for a year, sits on the bench, learns a Big Ben. It's not the worst thing in the world.
Right. And if it doesn't pan out, that's okay, because
if it doesn't pan out, you cut him, and then he goes to work, sells life insurance or whatever, and then you move on. You're on to Cincinnati. So
yeah.
I got to ask this before we go. We appreciate your time, by the way. J.J. Watt, because we kept hearing ESPN going buck wild about the Watt brothers reuniting, making the Steelers great again. All these crazy memes on ESPN all over the brothers, and it looks like that was not even close to happening.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't think it ever was either, but you can dream, I guess. And I think that's what a lot of Steelers fans were doing, thinking that he was going to come to Pittsburgh. I never really saw it happening, and it didn't, so.
The fantasy. Well, again, thank you for your time. Like and subscribe to this channel. We appreciate your time, and there you go. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.